Good evening. Welcome to MUFON LA. My name is Steve Murillo. I'm the State Section Director for MUFON LA. Tonight we have a great program for you. Our speaker is Leah Haley, and the speech will be entitled Alien Abductions, Mind Control, and Spirituality. In Leah Haley's regular life, she's a certified public accountant who holds 2 master's degrees. But there's another side to the serious professional, as she recounts in her latest autobiographical book, Unlocking Alien Closets. She has experienced unexplained phenomenon, alien encounters, and even covert quasi-military abductions. In her presentation for MUFON LA, Leah Haley will share details about her ordeal and her evolving spirituality. Let's all put our hands together and welcome to MUFON LA, Leah Haley.
Thank you very much. Is this working okay? My mic all right? Okay, I can't see you, so you can throw tomatoes at me and I won't even know where it came from, okay? You're at a great advantage here. I would like to thank this group for inviting me to be here with you tonight. Some of you have been friends for a long time, and it's nice to see you again. Others I'm meeting for the first time, and I'd like to thank you for your interest in this subject. And also a special note of appreciation to those of you who have contributed extra time to make meetings such as this take place. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't realize, so thank you for your efforts. And also a special thanks to all of you who are doing whatever you can, wherever you can, to educate people about this phenomenon. So all of you are contributing in some form or fashion. I hope all of you positively, and so thank you all for being here. I'd like to start off by talking about an email I received from a friend one day last week. It said, "Which of the following are true and which are false? Apples, not caffeine, are more efficient at waking you up in the morning." What do you think? Is that true or false? Okay, some people said true, some people said false. How about this one? A pack-a-day smoker will lose approximately 2 teeth every 10 years. Babies are born without kneecaps. The kneecaps don't appear until they are 2 to 6 years old. The average housefly lives for 1 month. A coat hanger is 44 inches long when straightened. The real reason ostriches stick their heads in the sand is to search for water. Think about that. True or false? True or false? Michael Jackson owns the rights to the South Carolina state anthem. And how about this one? Most of us have eaten a spider in our sleep. True or false? Okay, now, the message at the bottom of the email said that all of these statements are true. But I personally don't know whether they are or not, because I haven't taken the time to research them. Which leads me to my point. Our culture has taught us to formulate an opinion without examining the evidence. You can turn on the TV any day of the week and find that this is going on. You know, sometimes I get so frustrated with all of the major news networks. Every single one of them are guilty of this, and that is encouraging us to formulate these opinions. For example, Fox TV might say, okay, audience, what do you think? Email us and let us know. Is Scott Peterson guilty or innocent? That's just an example, okay? Email us and tell us what you think. We want to know what you think. Well, I get so furious at the networks encouraging this kind of thing because they have no right to ask me this question, I feel, because I don't have all the evidence. I haven't seen any of it, one way or the other. Yeah, I can formulate an opinion based upon the information that the news reporter gives me, but that's not really a fair basis for an opinion. If I don't have all of the data, then I'm not an authority on which to give a conclusion. So that's my point. So that said, I want you to understand that I'm not here to convince you of anything. I really don't care at all whether you believe one statement I say or not. I really don't care. Maybe a long time ago I would have cared, but I'm way past that now, frankly. I don't care. So my goals in being here tonight are these. One, to bring certain issues out into the open. Two, to encourage you all to keep an open mind and study all the evidence that you can acquire before making a judgment or reaching a conclusion, not just about what I say, but about anything, about any subject. Another reason I'm here is to let other people who are experiencing these strange phenomena know that they are not alone, and in all probability, they're not crazy. Now, granted, in all fields, we do have a few who have problems, okay? But for the most part, the people who say they have had these experiences are extremely serious about it and have gone through an awful lot of trauma as a result. Another reason that I'm here is to educate families and friends of these victims and help them to understand that their loved ones need support and love and all the help they can get, and certainly not ridicule and ostracism. Now, the experiences that I'm going to share here are from my own personal journals, but please understand that there are many people scattered throughout the United States who are going through or have gone through the same sorts of things as I, okay? A 2002 Roper poll, which was conducted at the request of the Sci-Fi Channel, showed that the incidence of abduction experiences appears to be on the order of at least 2% of the American population. If you multiply that out, that translates into millions of people. Now, some of you who might not have gone to very many meetings like this might have a problem with that large of a figure. I don't, because I travel all across the United States and meet people every day who have had experiences like this. So I think, and in talking to some other researchers, you know, that figure could even be a little bit on the low side. Now, as for my personal experiences, they started back in childhood. I grew up in Alabama. I'm a baby boomer, as you can tell. And I had a sighting in the early 60s, just north of Birmingham, a little community called Gardendale, Alabama. And here's what I saw with my brother and a friend who lived in the same neighborhood. It was just a spherical object that just stayed stationary in the sky for a long time, eventually floated down into the woods. We went looking for the object, and as far as we knew, we came back out of the woods very disappointed that we hadn't found it. My next experience occurred probably in the late 70s or maybe early 80s. I did not document the date when it occurred, but what happened there was that I woke up one morning and I recalled that during the night I had been aboard a spacecraft that had a circular room in it, and I was lying on a platform, flat on my back, paralyzed, and I had medical experiments conducted on me by a group of off-white colored entities that looked basically like that. Had big black eyes, just 2 little holes for a nose. I couldn't remember a mouth at all. 4 fingers instead of 5. And I remembered that encounter consciously, but in the context of my life, I could not accept it as reality. I would not accept it as reality. I'd never, ever, in the late 70s or early 80s, heard of anybody else in the whole world having had abduction experiences, other than there was a Pascagoula incident that I'd heard a little bit about, but on the news, just a couple of sentences, but I didn't know any details about it. But I'd never heard of anybody being abducted by creatures like this. And since it occurred at night, I tried to explain it away as a dream, and effectively was able to do that, even though it seemed just as real as you and I here together right now. I just could not accept the reality of it. However, in the early 90s, something triggered my memory of this prior encounter, and at the same time, I started having more encounters with these creatures. Now, I'm not going to talk about a whole lot about the experiences themselves, because I could probably do several lectures just on my encounters with these entities, but I will give you an overview of them. Typically what happened was that I would be in a round room. The room was intensely bright. I don't ever recall seeing the source of the lighting in the rooms. And I've had these entities insert needles into my abdomen and extract ova, put it in a black box. I've been shown by these entities what I call a baby greenhouse, because it looks like a hospital nursery, sort of, where they seem to be growing human-alien hybrids. So I've seen that. I've also seen them take samples, skin and tissue samples, and put various bodily pieces, not like arms and legs. I haven't seen that, although I've heard reports of that, but little skin samples and stuff in test tubes. And I recall that the test tubes were not like ours. The ones that I saw looked like they were made out of pewter, and I'm not sure that's what the substance was, but that's what it reminded me of. And on one or more occasions, I remembered the craft going down into the ocean with these creatures on board. I've also had experiences with other alien entities, including this one right here, who you can see was a lot shorter than these and had different shaped eyes. And then this one right here, called a reptilian. And some of you have heard me say this before, but you have to use your imagination in dealing with these entities, because I made a D in art, and I can't draw as well as I can count. So I did the best I could, but that doesn't really portray exactly what these creatures looked like. I've also encountered some entities that looked entirely human. They call themselves Pleiadians, and the ones that I saw had brown hair and brown eyes. I've heard reports of Pleiadians with other descriptions, but the ones I saw who called themselves Pleiadians had brown hair. Now, even at this point in time in the early 90s, at the very beginning of the 90s, I still did not want to accept the reality of my experiences, because, after all, our government said that UFOs did not exist, and I wasn't taught in school and church or at home that alien abductions happened. So since I grew up in a culture that did not address these issues, I couldn't accept the reality of it myself at first, and so I understand a lot of other people having difficulty with this subject at first. What finally convinced me that I was not dreaming and I was not going crazy? Well, the first thing was another kind of change that took place in my life. And that was that when I started asking questions about my abduction experiences and trying to find out if there were other people just like me, I started being followed. I started hearing clicks on my telephone, and other family members noticed that they were having the same problems. My parents, who lived in Alabama in the 90s, and I lived in Mississippi, by the way, in the 90s. Even my parents, quite a few miles away from me, started being watched by military personnel. FBI started asking questions about my husband at his place of employment. My two teenage daughters were all upset because people started following them. So that was one thing, the first thing. And another thing was being directly threatened by military people and told that if I didn't keep my mouth shut about my experiences, they'd blow my head off. So I thought, okay, well, if this is not real, if I'm just going nuts or dreaming it up, why threats, why the following, why the harassment? Also, during that period of time, I had some experiences in the early evening and even in the daytime when I was wide awake, out driving my car. So I couldn't explain it away as a dream anymore, since it happened also in the daylight hours when I was away from home and not in my bed. And then a thing came out of my mouth in 1991. Now, this is magnified 250 times, but what it was a little tiny square that was kind of metallic, and you see it's not square now. That's because some MUFON members had the object analyzed for me, and the person who analyzed it had to cut away part of the material to find out what it was. This thing just worked its way out of my lower gum. I just felt something trying to get out of my gum behind my lower front teeth. And, you know, it was trying to get out of my gum. And I messed with it for a long time, you know, trying to dig it out with my fingernail and dislodge it with my tongue, and it was sticking out of my gum from the inside of my gum. Eventually, after messing with it for quite some time, I was able to dislodge it and scrape it out. And I was holding this little object in the palm of my hand and thinking, what in the world is that? How did it get into my mouth? How long has it been there? Etc. My husband walked into the room, and I showed it to him, and I said, what is this thing? He says, it looks like a computer chip. Where did you get it? And I said, out of my mouth. Well, what it turned out to be, as far as the analysis went, was, oh gosh, I don't have that in front of me, but it was approximately 80% copper and approximately 20% zinc with traces of aluminum and silicon, which really didn't tell me a whole lot. It told me what the material was made of. It was consistent with common brass, but it didn't explain how long it had been in my mouth and how it got there and why it was there. I still don't have the answers to those questions. Another thing that convinced me that my experiences were real and I wasn't going crazy is that I awakened in the morning with numerous marks on my body at various times. And my husband at the time was working away from home. Most of the time he worked as a nurse anesthetist, and he was self-employed. He contracted himself out to hospitals where there was a shortage of anesthetists for various reasons. Maybe an anesthetist was on an extended vacation or something of that nature, and then he would go fill in, usually in another state. So he wasn't there to inject me with anything or or to scoop skin out of my body, but that's the kind of thing that happened to me. You know, I'd wake up and have injection marks on my body, scars, some that weren't there the day before but appeared overnight and were healed, scoop marks, various kinds of bruises, what I call brands, like I might have this red, solid red triangle on my body, or a circle. Vaccinations, sometimes I had marks on me that looked like weird kinds of vaccinations. And for a long period of time, I had these deep indentations in my lower back. I still don't know how those got there. They were on my back for a long period of time. I never did hurt myself there. And I never had any bleeding or anything like that. It's just that they were there. Now, recently, on Whitley Strieber's website, a male abductee had sent in a photograph of what he called scoop marks on his back, and they looked very, very similar to this. And I see some nods in the audience. I know some of you have seen these. And I can't tell you how those got on my body. All I know is that when they appeared, I was having experiences. But I cannot relate this particular set of marks to any particular experience. There's this triangular mark that was up here on my shoulder. There it is, a smaller version of it. Actually, it's the same mark, it's just a different photograph. And then what this was a series of punctures in a circle that was on my back. It doesn't show up very well in the slide. The main reason is because it was a couple of weeks old when the photo was taken, and here's why. Like I said, my husband was away from home when much of this was going on. And I noticed one day some marks on my back. Actually, it was about right in here. Let's see, this upper part of my back. I noticed some red marks on my back, but looking into a mirror backwards, I couldn't see that they formed a pattern, you know, because of the angle. However, a couple of weeks after I saw those red marks, and my husband met me in Florida. We were doing some research investigating down in the Gulf Breeze area at that time, and my husband met me down there one weekend when we went down to do some research, and that's when he saw the mark on my back, and he said that it was a series of punctures on my back. And what made me discover it was that we were spending the weekend with some friends, and when I took a shower, something was burning my back horribly. My friends had a different kind of soap than what I was accustomed to, and I have very sensitive skin, and so it was just really, really burning my back. So I went downstairs where my husband was, and I lifted my T-shirt down so that he could see what was on my back, and that's when he discovered the mark. And he said it was a series of punctures. And the reason it was burning is because some of them had not healed. Some of them had healed, and one or two of them really don't show up very well at all. He could see them, and my friends there saw them, but it's hard to see in the picture, the ones that had healed. I have no recollection of what caused the mark. It was a mystery to me as to what caused that. No memory associated with it. Well, a little bit of one, but I'm not sure if it went with that particular experience or not. Another thing that convinced me that I was not crazy, not dreaming, is that other abductees have seen me aboard the craft in their encounters, and also my brother and sister have now given me permission to tell people that they've had experiences too. When I wrote Lost Was the Key and came out with it in 1993, nobody else in my family was willing to go public with their experiences at that time, and I had to respect that. And I doubt that you could get my brother or my sister to come up here and talk with you today. But they did give me written reports of some of their experiences and allowed me to publish those in Unlocking Alien Closets that came out last year. My sister saw a hooded creature. She had an encounter with one of those, and she cannot remember what the face looked like. She's tried really hard, but she just can't. But that's a sketch that she herself drew. I don't recall myself ever seeing one of these, ever. Oh, by the way, my sister and my brother, they've not ever had any hypnosis sessions. What they do remember, they've remembered all consciously. Now, I'd like to go into some of the experiences that have been the most troubling to me, and one of them concerned this creature right here. Now, there was another slide of him, the one that I had in the picture, the one I had in the sketch where I said I can't draw made a D in art. Let me go back to that one. Well, it's the same as this thing right here. Okay, so I got a police sketch artist to draw this creature according to my description, and this other slide is what she came up with. The reality of what that thing really looked like is kind of a combination between those two things. She didn't get it 100% exact, and I didn't either, but that gives you a general idea. He did have on a blue jumpsuit, and he had an emblem, and I can't remember if he had it on both shoulders or just one shoulder, but the emblem was a circle with a red triangle inside the circle. I do remember this, what it looked like. And I remember specifically that it had that kind of a collar on the jumpsuit, and it specifically had a red sash on it. That I remember. Now, why was this experience upsetting to me? It was upsetting to me because the experience occurred in a very human facility and not aboard an alien craft. It occurred in a camouflaged military facility. It was a facility that was inside a hillside. There were like wide garage door openings that slid open horizontally, and therein was a military base. There were military men wearing green fatigues working right alongside this guy. And what they were doing to me was they had me paralyzed on a table. I was strapped down, couldn't move, and they kept asking me over and over again what happens to me when I'm on board the alien craft with those first creatures I showed you, the ones with the big black eyes. So I was being interrogated about those experiences, and I'm a little bit stubborn, and I would not answer the questions. And every time the military person asked me the question and I refused to answer, he did something to make shock go all the way through my body, and he'd repeat the question, and again I refused to answer, and the shock became more intense until I finally passed out. As far as I know, I didn't ever answer the questions, but that was very upsetting to me. Another experience that was upsetting was one that I mentioned earlier when I said that I was taken by military personnel, and some of them put M16s to my head and told me if I ever spoke about an experience, they'd blow my head off. Now, what preceded that was that I'd had an encounter with the creatures with the big black eyes. And the creatures always took me back home, put me back in my bed, or if I was out driving, they put me back in my car. They always took me back to where they'd taken me from, except for this one night. And one night, they didn't take me all the way back home. Instead, they dropped me off in a field near my home. And I was standing there kind of dazed, thinking, I've got to get back home, I've got to get back home, when a military helicopter landed in front of me, and men wearing green fatigues and carrying M16s grabbed me and took me aboard a helicopter and took me to a base nearby. There was a man wearing a Air Force blue uniform who was obviously the one in control. He was the one issuing the orders for the pickup of me. But when I was taken to the base, and I must admit it was not voluntarily that I went. I was kicking and screaming and saying a few choice words that I really probably shouldn't utter in here on videotape. But I was dragged quite unwillingly into a conference room. As soon as I was shoved into the room, and by the way, they were quite rough with me, and I didn't like that very much either. I was shoved into the room, and there was a guy standing at the door waiting for me to come in, and he shoved a needle into my right arm. And after I was given a shot, I was shoved down into a chair. Now, there were people seated around a conference room table waiting for me to be brought in. So they knew ahead of time I was coming. And a man wearing a khaki uniform was standing at the opposite side of the room. And he was the one that was ultimately in charge of the operation, apparently, because he's the one who issued the death threats. And I remembered a woman wearing a blue Air Force uniform coming into the room, setting a tape recorder down on the table. So I assume they taped the entire scenario there. And the last thing I remembered was being put aboard some kind of military truck. I was put in the back of a truck. I assume it was a medic truck, but I don't know. I don't know what kind it was because I was so drugged up. But I was put in there and passed out. So I woke up at home in my bed. So I assume they took me back home. Another incident that I had that was quite unpleasant was being in a place that I call a deprogramming chamber. I don't know where this chamber is located. I don't remember how I got there. I don't remember how I got back home. I just remember some of the things that took place in the deprogramming chamber, and that is that I was strapped into a chair, and inside some kind of a structure that it looked like it had a domed ceiling. That's my perception of it anyway. And I had the perception of the ceiling coming down and going back up and coming down and going back up. And maybe I was going up and down, I'm not sure, but the perception I had was that of the ceiling coming down and going back up. And I remembered extremely bright white light being flashed into my eyes, and then a symbol, and then the bright white light again, and the symbol, bright white light symbol, over and over and over again. And the man in the khaki uniform, which I feel certain is the same one that was in the earlier experience in the conference room. The guy in the khaki uniform told me that his group did not like the information the aliens were giving me, and so his group intended to wipe those memories from my mind, and they would replace those memories with those of their own choosing. In other words, he said that his group was going to implant memories in my head. That's what I would remember, and not instead of what the aliens had told me. So I found that experience quite unpleasant also. Excuse me, just 1 second. Another experience that I had that was a little bit unusual was this. One night I was standing in line with a bunch of other abductees, and I felt as if we had been extremely heavily drugged, and we were waiting for something in line, single file. We were standing single file, and I was looking around to see if I recognized anybody else in line. And I turned around, and at first I thought I saw an abductee friend of mine. But then when I looked more closely, I could see that it wasn't my friend at all. It looked like an alien instead. So I was trying to fight the effects of the drugs, which is very difficult because whatever we'd been given was extremely strong. But I walked up closer to this alien. As I started moving up closer to it, it moved, And I thought, there's something wrong with this situation. You know, what's wrong here? And first thing that I noticed was that the alien was shaped more like a small woman than it was an alien. And then I saw it bend its elbows and bend its knees when it walked. And the chalky-colored creatures that I'd seen didn't move in quite the same way. They didn't move in such a jointed manner as we humans do. And so I thought, oh my gosh, you know, there's something wrong here. So I got closer and closer to the alien and got right up in its face. And I could see where the black eyes were really just patches sewn on the fabric. I was so close that I could actually see where the black patches were stitched. I could see the stitching. I could see the weave in the fabric. Now, after that, I thought, oh my gosh, if these people ever discover that I'm aware enough to realize what's going on here, I'm going to be in real deep trouble. You know, they'll give me a super duper dose of the drug or whatever to erase my memory, and I won't remember this, so I'd better pretend like I don't catch on. So I turned around in line and just stood there like a good little zombie, and shortly after that we were moved forward and put into some sort of transport device like a tram, and the door slid open horizontally. When the transport device stopped, doors on the opposite side opened, we stepped out, and that's where my memory ends. I can't remember anything else after that point in time. Now, if you go do some searching on the internet, in some of the debunking, what you're going to find is that Leah Haley had this experience that was reminiscent of an X-Files episode, because there was an episode quite like that on X-Files, and that's true. But whatever debunker decided to throw that onto the internet failed to mention that Leah Haley discussed this experience in her lectures long before the X-Files episode was ever written and aired. So just keep that in mind when you're doing research, you know. So he got it right, he just got it backwards, you know. It's like the X-Files episode was reminiscent of what Leah Haley had talked about in her lecture months before. Another experience that I had occurred in the year 2000. During the night, I had some weird kind of an experience where I felt as if I was going down into an underground facility where there were aliens. And I was terrified, for some reason, terrified to the extent that I really thought that I was going to have a heart attack. I was, at the time that took place, I was going down into an elevator-like device. I felt kind of like it reminded me of some of the movies I've seen where you had mine workers going down into a mine shaft via an old elevator of sorts. And that's a sensation I got, and that's what it seemed like to me. And I knew that whatever was going to happen to me once I was taken to that facility was going to be awful. And I was just screaming in terror. Now, what happened, though, was that I managed to scream or moan enough that it awakened my husband. This is husband number 2. His husband number 1, who used to be who was the anesthetist, couldn't handle all this stuff that was going on, and he particularly couldn't handle my speaking out about this subject, so he dumped me. But now husband number 2, well, you have to laugh about it. There's not much else we can do. So husband number 2, who was quite supportive emotionally anyway, said that that I was moaning in my sleep, and he awakened me and asked me to tell him, you know, what was causing me to to be so terrified in my sleep. And we were sitting there in bed at 4:30 in the morning trying to determine whether I had just come back from an abduction experience that I remembered only part of, or whether in my sleep I was remembering one that had occurred in the past. And I really don't know, frankly, whether I just had one that was horrible or whether I was remembering one that was horrible. At any rate, we were talking about it, you know, giving the pros and cons of each scenario. And I was really, really tired, felt exhausted, and after we discussed it and didn't come to any conclusion, I was able to fall back asleep. But my husband just stayed up. You know, we discussed it for about 30 minutes, so it was 5 a.m. Then it was time for him to get up and go to work pretty soon anyway, so he stayed up and got dressed for work. At 5:30, he came back into the bedroom and woke me up and told me I had to get up and go to work. Well, for some reason, I felt awful. I felt as if a truck had run over me. I had no energy, just totally stressed out, drained. And I said, okay, I'll get up in a minute. And he left. He went ahead and left for work. But I couldn't get up. Soon after he left, I heard this voice in my head, and it said, stay in bed, you have a headache. And I knew it was coming from an external source because I'd had this kind of thing happen to me before. And as I was told by this voice that I had a headache, my head literally started hurting. And it repeated, stay in bed, you have a headache. And mentally, I tried to fight against this voice and say, go away, I have to go to work. And I really did need to go to work. You know, I wasn't trying to slack off and get out of it. And so I worked at a place where I was paid by the hour, and if I didn't go to work, I didn't get paid. And the plant where I worked was going to be shut down for 2 weeks pretty soon, and I really, really needed every penny that I could acquire because for 2 weeks I was going to get no pay. So I kept trying to force myself to get out of bed, but I was powerless. This voice rendered me totally powerless. And as this was going on, I heard what sounded like a helicopter come over the roof and stop. And I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker and paralyzed at that point. At the time that the helicopter came over, you know, I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything at all. Then suddenly, as I was about to just fall into a deep sleep or pass out or whatever, suddenly I heard the helicopter fly away. And then this voice said, oh, that wasn't a helicopter. That was just an airplane with engine trouble. At that same point in time, my husband came flying into the house, flying into the bedroom, screaming, Leah, are you okay? Are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not okay. Why do you ask? You're supposed to be at work. And he said, what happened was he had started to work and he had gotten some distance and he had an upset stomach and he had to come back home. And when he did, he caught the helicopter hovering over our rooftop, just right above the roof. And he made a rude gesture at it, and it flew away. So the point here is that he caught this helicopter, and I don't imagine it was a helicopter itself because that's just a piece of machinery, but whoever was in that helicopter conducting mind control on me, rendering me powerless to move and do anything. Now, I don't know what the intentions were. You know, I don't know because my husband caught it that day. A couple of weeks later, when the plant was shut down, my husband came home at the end of the day after a full day of work and caught one of those helicopters over the roof again. And I don't know what happened that day. I can't tell you what happened that day. I don't know. But again, the helicopter flew off. It probably got me that time, but I have no memory whatsoever of what happened that day. None. And that has happened quite a few times with me, is having periods of time where I have absolutely no memory of what occurred. It's extremely bothersome to know that there are days out of your life where you can't remember anything and you wonder where you were, what you were doing, did you do anything wrong, did anybody do anything to you that could have permanent repercussions. You know, there's still so many unanswered questions. Even though I've had experiences myself, I still have lots and lots of questions that go unanswered. The black helicopters still buzz my house from time to time. Every once in a while they'll come in and they'll just circle right over it. And I've moved, by the way. You know, it happened when I lived in Mississippi, but not to my neighbors. When I've lived in 4 places in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is where I live now. Same thing. The black unmarked helicopters don't bother my neighbors, but in all 4 places I've lived in Murfreesboro since 1995, they've come and circled my house, flown right over my roof, hovered over my roof. And it has happened several times this year even. I think May 4th was the last time it happened. I've taken pictures of them some of the times. Let's see. There's one of them. There's one of them. And there's another one. So I've got pictures of the May 4th one too, I think, but I didn't get those slides developed yet. You know, I don't even see any point in it. You know, they all look the same. So there you go. I've traced these helicopters to 2 different places. When I lived in Mississippi, I discovered that they were flying off from and landing at Columbus Air Force Base in Columbus, Mississippi. Where I live now, I've seen them take off from and land at Smyrna, Tennessee Airport, south of Nashville. And I don't know who they belong to yet. I intend to do a little bit more research on these things. Don't know if I'll get any answers, but I'm certainly going to try to find out who owns these things. I mentioned that mind control a little while ago, where this voice told me to stay in bed, that I was getting sick and getting a headache. Oh, by the way, it told me that I could call in sick later, too. It tried to put that into my head. But there are other times that mind control has happened when I was just driving down the road. I was driving to work one day when this voice told me to run the car next to me off the road. Luckily, I was able to identify that as mind control and you know, I became aware of it. And of course, I didn't do what I was told. Another time, the same week, in fact, 1999, same week, I was told to stick my arm in the oven by this voice. So whoever's doing this, they're not very nice people, and it makes me wonder about some of the things that are happening in the world, like the school shootings and things like that. You know, I have to ask myself the question, you know, is it possible that some of these things are occurring because some of these people are being used by this group conducting these experiments, or maybe it's gone past experimentation and these people are utilizing others to do things that are illegal. Another type of experience that I've had that I'm really having a lot of struggles with right now is what I call virtual reality experiences, and they're not necessarily bad. Some of them are. But virtual reality experiences, I did not coin that phrase. Some of my fellow abductees did. What I mean by that is that they're experiences that occur while I'm asleep, but at the time they're going on, they seem very, very real. It's like I'm acting in a play while I'm in my sleep time, like I'm an actor in this play, but the play seems like reality, real life, while it's going on. And these are different from my normal dreams. So my normal dreams are not sequential necessarily. They don't necessarily make sense. They might jump from one scene to another or from one person to another without any kind of consistency or sequence or logic. But in these virtual reality experiences, there is sequence, there's logic, thought processes, analyses, and like I said, just like living life. They're not any different at all while they're occurring. Some of these involve situations so terrifying that I feel as if I'm going to have a heart attack while they're occurring. I had been leaning toward the theory that these scenarios are being beamed into my head via remote influencing or some other sort of mind control technology. But I also have to question whether or not some of these experiences maybe really did happen at some point in time and I'm remembering real events. And what really made me question this theory was in light of the recent news stories about the Iraqi prisoners being tormented and humiliated by the use of attack dogs. And the reason that got my attention is because in some of these most terrifying virtual reality experiences that I've had, that's exactly what was happening to me. Anybody who's been who has done any monitoring of me would know that I am terrified of those attack dogs. I was bitten when I was a child, and although I have nothing against dogs, and I had my own dogs when I was growing up, I still have this horrible fear of other people's attack dogs. And I can't help it. I'm pretty sure it stems from having being bitten as a child. And I have had numerous virtual reality experiences where attack dogs were gnawing off my skin, and I have to wonder if I've really had some experiences at the hands of these mind controllers where they were really using these attack dogs to try to get me to do whatever it was they wanted me to do. And I don't know. I don't have that question answered yet. I don't know if all of these virtual reality experiences are beamed into my head from some external source, or whether some things really happened and I'm just remembering those past events. I don't know. That question's still up in the air. I know that some of them are beamed from an external source. Some of them are, but I don't know about all of them. There's one experience that I had that really bothers me that I wrote about in Unlocking Alien Closets that had to deal with a factory, and that virtual reality experience keeps on haunting me and haunting me and haunting me. And I'm wondering, if it was just an implanted memory, why does it haunt me so much? So I have that question still. So I'm doing research now on virtual reality experiences, and I hope that the next time I come back here, I hope I'll have more information on it. I don't know, but I'll try. I've been trying to find the answers to my own questions, obviously, since I have so many remaining, and been doing a lot of research, talking to abductees all over the country, talking to researchers all over the country. Luckily, because I'm out lecturing about this kind of thing, I run into hundreds of people who have things to say about this subject. And of course, the internet has helped a lot. And in the course of my research, I've been able to come across the pictures of some of my human abductors. And I've learned that These people have abducted other people I know also. And in the course of my research, actually my husband, my current husband, husband number 2, who's very supportive of what we're doing here, came across a picture of this thing. This is called a sticky shocker. What it is a non-lethal weapon used by law enforcement officers and military personnel. It uses stun gun technology on a wireless, self-contained projectile. The projectile carries a battery pack and associated electronics that will impart a short burst of high voltage pulses, and it is used to disable a human. Notice that it has short barbs on the end of it. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 barbs around it. These barbs are put on the end of this thing in order to penetrate thick clothing that a human being might be wearing. And here's another picture of it just to show you how big it is in relation to a human. And I fully believe that that is what is responsible for making this mark on my back. Notice I had punctures on my back, barbs on the sticky shocker, align with the punctures on my back. And note this, you couldn't see this in the other slide I had, but notice, bruise, bruise, bruise. Now, when my husband looked at my back and examined it, oh, by the way, there was another one of these down in my lower back on the left side also, but it had faded so much by then that it didn't show up in a photograph at all. Oh, it apparently had been there longer than this one had. But anyway, my husband saw these bruises next to this thing, and so we figured that what must have happened is when the person took the barbs out of my back, it's like they had to press their hand into my back to press down on my back to pull the barbs out of my back. We assume that that's what happened due to the location of this thing. So, that still didn't tell me who did it, who shot the thing at me. I still don't know that because I still have no memory. Whoever got me in the back. Apparently, I never did see them before I was hit, and then it was too late. I call these human abductors covert human experimentation operatives when I'm in a nice mood. I have other private terms I use for them. But I call them CHIOPs, so you're free to use that term if you want. And we'll all be on the same page when we're talking about these creatures, because I don't know what else I can really call them. That's what they do. They're working under, covertly. Now, speaking of mind control, I'll go back one slide. Now, Sandra brought this up when she was up here, and she said that the CIA has lost or destroyed some documents about mind control. However, there are some that are available. Under the Freedom of Information Act, you can write to the CIA, and if you send them a $30 check, which I did, you will get back a letter like this. Now, I can't take credit for this. A friend emailed me about, it was early last fall, and told me that the CIA had released a lot of their MK Ultra and Project Artichoke documents. And the friend said, if you write a letter in this format and send it to the CIA along with $30, you will get some CDs that have the MK Ultra documents on them. Well, I thought, yeah, right. You know, I really was skeptical. I have to admit, I was skeptical of that, and I thought, what the heck, you know, I want these documents so badly that the worst that can happen is that I'll lose $30. Okay, so I sent a letter in to the CIA and was totally surprised when a month later I received this letter, see, addressed to me, from the CIA Information and Privacy Coordinator. And the letter explains that he has sent me the 3 CDs of the officially released MK Ultra and behavioral research documents, and he explains that it has to be on 3 CDs because there are almost 20,000 pages worth of documents. So, a person who says that mind control is not going on has not bothered to look at the fact that the CIA has admitted to conducting such experiments and has released some of these documents under the Freedom of Information Act. I've been too busy lecturing across the country to read 20,000 pages worth of documents. I do well to get my email answered. I have looked at a couple of them. The first one that I looked at was accounting documents, which of course I was interested in since I'm a CPA, and it said, you know, it told where some of the money went, $10,000 to this psychologist for conducting this kind of test, and $5,000 to this doctor for doing such and such, that kind of thing, telling where some of the money went. And a second document, which another friend had already emailed me a copy of this document, but I had to confirm for myself that it actually was on the CDs, and so I did confirm that. And here's the essence of that. It says, in essence, that the CIA conducted an experiment where this Miss X and Miss Y were brought in, and I'll call her Miss X anyway. Miss X hated guns. She wouldn't have anything to do with them. So the test was to see if Miss X, having been given a post-hypnotic suggestion, would pick up a gun and kill somebody, even though she hated guns. That was the test. Now, they had been these people had been given post-hypnotic suggestions the night before, and they were told that if somebody pointed a finger at them, that they would fall into this trance-like condition. So, on the night of the gun test, the finger was pointed. The subjects X and Y went into this alternate personality trance-like condition, and Miss X, given the directions, did pick up the gun and fire it at Miss Y. There were blanks in the gun, okay, so X did not actually kill Y, thankfully, but the point is that the CIA conducted the test. They admitted to giving people post-hypnotic suggestions in under conditions like this, and they proved to themselves that they could make a person kill somebody else, even if he or she was totally against weapons and killing. So, I found that extremely disturbing, extremely interesting, and extremely interested that the CIA has admitted to this kind of test. And you can get these documents yourself. Like I said, you don't have to believe me or anybody else. They're available. All you have to do is write the same kind of letter I wrote and send in your $30 check. You know, you have it for yourselves to examine. Oh, and you might want to know this. You don't even have to buy the documents anymore because Whitley Strieber has put these on his website. I think you have to subscribe to Whitley Strieber's website in order to get the documents. It's unknowncountry.com. But Whitley told me last week that he has put all 20,000 pages on his website for subscribers to get to now, and he asked his audience to help us with this project too, because see, the problem is these are not Word documents, that they're photocopies of documents, which means that they are not searchable, which means that you have to dig through them. So Whitley's asking for people who actually go there and look at these documents to email him or me and tell us, like, such and such document deals with such and such experiment or subject matter. Like this one right here that's numbered up here at the top, we would know deals with the woman who is given instructions to kill somebody even though she cannot stand guns. Okay, so that way, if everybody's working on the project, we can get the 20,000 pages in some kind of a form where people can search a whole lot better. You also should know that the NSA and CIA also released UFO documents because of the Freedom of Information Act. You can go to their respective websites and find the UFO documents that they have released. As of April 28th, the NSA had 40 UFO-related documents on their website. The CIA had 278. Now, one of those sites is tricky to use. They're really smart. I have to give them credit for their intelligence. I put in UFOs, both with periods and without periods, unidentified flying objects, flying saucers, blah, blah, blah. I put in their search block on the website, you know, search this site for these words. I tried all those words, and the response I got was, we have found 0 documents. However, I knew they were there. I knew the documents were there, so I kept on and on and on trying to find these documents on the website. And the way that you can find them is click on the subject line, the topic index. If you click on index and then scroll down to UFO, then they'll all come up. But if you try to do the search function, they won't. So just keep that in mind, but they are there. Another thing that I came across was that NASA has admitted to doing this mind reading experimentation. They say that they've been doing it because they want to read terrorists' minds at airports. So, point here is that we have the admission of this. Okay? That's the point. Another thing that I came across recently is that CBS printed a news story on January 29, 2002, in which Donald Rumsfeld admitted that there was an estimated $2.3 trillion that military auditors have been unable to account for. So, if we don't think there are any black ops going on, where did that $2.3 trillion go? Now, I'm a CPA, and I can tell you that you can't just casually lose $2.3 trillion. You know, you just can't do it. But there's $2.3 trillion missing, and Rumsfeld admitted that. Some more research that I've done deals with a problem I had trying to mesh all these things that happened to me with my upbringing in my conservative Southern Baptist church. If you know anything about the conservative Southern Baptist church, you can imagine how difficult it was for me, having once been a Sunday school teacher and a Bible school teacher and being at church every time the door opened. You know, trying to deal with my experiences in that context, it was real hard. I stopped going to church for about 10 years. I had a real problem. And I had a question though, you know, how did my alien abduction experiences fit into everything else? So I had to go to the Bible and do research. And this was not taught to me in Sunday school, okay? I never saw it in a Sunday school book that I'd ever read about Genesis 6, 1 through 4, where Genesis talks about the spirit beings coming down from another place and mingling with the daughters of men and producing the hybrid giants, and that, in fact, I've discovered from the Bible, was where God got so ticked off about what was going on that he cut men's lives down to 120 years, which that's why we don't live to be 700 or 800 years old anymore, according to what I read in the Bible, is because God got ticked off that these hybrid giants were being created against his wishes. So I kept on looking in there, and in it, the scripture that I read said that the things didn't stop happening either. That kind of thing continued. So, you know, I don't want to get into, you know, I'm not about to get into religion or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. I'm just talking. The reason I'm talking about this is because, you know, I wanted to share with you what questions I had as far as trying to put it together in the big scheme of things, and in relation to where my teachings came from. And so that's what I found. So I was able to integrate what I'd been taught, or actually what I should have been taught, okay? I was able to put it together with what had happened to me so that it made a little bit more sense. In my research, in the biblical research, I also found the scriptural support for the existence of ghosts, and also the importance of paying attention to our dreams. So I found the background for that kind of thing too. So it made me pay a little bit more attention to that kind of thing. Now, I've taken the liberty of pointing out what I consider my worst experiences, and that's what I focused on here tonight. But please keep in mind that not all of my strange experiences have been negative. I've had some weird experiences that were very positive. Some of them have resulted in very positive things as far as my life is concerned. For instance, as far as the aliens are concerned, there was one occasion in which I was extremely sick, even felt that I was dying, and those chalky colored creatures with the big black eyes nursed me back to health. I've had some telepathic, externally generated, what I call silent voice messages that were spiritual lessons. Those things started in 1991 about the same time that I started having lots and lots of alien abduction experiences, I also started getting these silent voice messages, these messages from an external source. I couldn't see where the messages were coming from or who they were coming from. I just knew if they were coming from somewhere outside my head. But I got messages such as, do not repay negativity with negativity, get rid of all fear, anger, and worry. They create mind noise. Things like that to help me emotionally and spiritually. And I also had a positive virtual reality experience. I told you a minute ago that I had some where there were dogs gnawing off my flesh, and those were extremely disturbing to me, but I also had a very positive one. This one that was extremely positive occurred when I was writing Unlocking Alien Closets, and I had a whole lot of unresolved issues at that period of time. And I still wasn't going to church either. Remember, I said that I was out of church for a long, long time. But I had a virtual reality experience that involved a nun and Jesus. Now, I thought it was extremely significant that I had a dream about a nun because I'd never had any kind of Catholic background whatsoever. As far as I knew, I'd never been in a Catholic church in my entire life. So I really had to pay attention to this one that involved a nun. I won't go into the details. I've written about them. But suffice it to say that I believe that this virtual reality experience came from a supernatural source, a positive supernatural source. It caused me to start going to church again, a particular church, and as soon as I started going to that particular church, some of the questions that I had that needed to be answered before I could complete Unlocking Alien Closets were answered in those first set of sermons that I went to at that church. So I thought that was really, really weird. It's not a Baptist church I'm going to, by the way. I mean, it would have been okay. So, like I said, I don't want to get into religion or anything. But I started going to a different kind, and I'm still going to that church because I'm getting some of the answers to my questions answered there. And it was because of this virtual reality experience that I started going there. And that's where that positive spiritual effect comes from, and why I labeled the subtitle what I did, including the word spirituality. It was a fluke how I got Unlocking Alien Closets published. I published it myself. I didn't have a penny. I had no idea under the sun where I was going to get the money to get that book printed. No idea whatsoever. But as soon as I got one of the big questions answered that I needed to get answered, and I started getting quotes from various printers and decided on a printer, but I still had no money in which to publish it. And the printer told me that he would accept payments in 3 separate payments, and I didn't even have payment number 3. But at the time that I got the proof of the book ready to send to the printer, 1/3 of the money was there from a miraculous source. And then when the second third was due, same thing. When the third was due, same thing. 3 miracles occurred that just gave me the exact amount of money at the exact amount of time that I needed to pay it. Not a penny more, not a penny less. It was freaky. But that was one of those good freaky things instead of a bad one. Some of you know that for a long time I wasn't able to give lectures on this subject. I was in pretty bad health physically and extremely bad health spiritually because I'd had a lot of problems from bad outside forces trying to knock me down, all these debunking attacks and setups and on and on and on, which is another lecture in and of itself, so I won't go into that. But I'm fully convinced that positive spiritual forces have given me the energy to get back out and do this thing again because the subject is so important. And I've been threatened. I've continued to get threats from time to time. But, you know, from somewhere I'm getting the strength to go out and discuss these subjects despite the threats. And I feel strongly that this energy is coming from positive forces that I can't see. And I can't put my finger on it, but I believe that it's there. The bottom line is I see it, which you may or may not agree with, which is fine, but as I see it, it seems to me that this whole phenomenon is part of the fight between good and evil. I've seen it at every level, in the human realm, in the alien realm, in the spiritual realm. You know, even within our organization, within MUFON, we've seen fighting between one side and the other, and you know, we have to admit it. It happens, and I've just seen it at every level. Because of that, I want to talk a little bit about fear. I'm totally convinced that fear is the major weapon the dark side uses to keep us under their control. That's why cover-ups are so effective. Remember I told you that back in the early 90s, the military told me, actually I should not say the military, that's not really fair. I'm not being fair to them. What I should say is that a small group with selfish intentions within the military, okay, just a small covert group, I told you that they warned me if I talked about my experiences, they'd blow my head off. Well, I had a choice at that point in time. If I'd chosen to remain silent, I would have been contributing to their cover-up activities. I believed their threats back then and lived in total fear for about a year. I was so scared that I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I was 100% paranoid. I made up a brand new will, set forth my burial wishes and all that kind of thing. You know, wrote letters to my family and put them in sealed envelopes, all those things that you do if you think you're going to die, because I believe them. I believe those people, and so I lived that way for a year, and I can tell you that it was no way to live at all. It was no fun. So I decided that I'd rather be dead than to have to live in fear all the time. And besides that, my conscience wouldn't allow me to remain silent because I didn't feel that being silent about this was the right thing to do. It took a lot of prayer and meditation, spiritual guidance to get over the fear and be able to talk about this publicly. But I managed to do it. And then I discovered that it really is fairly easy to get over your fear once you come to terms with the fact that the mortality rate always has been and still is 100%. And I hate to be the one to break it to you guys, but everybody in this room is going to die. Sometime, physically that is. So what I had to learn was that it was not my physical body that was important, that it was my soul. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately and thinking about how effective the cover-up's been. And the only way we're going to stop that is to stop being wimpy and stop allowing the dark side to control us through their threats like they controlled me at the beginning. We have to have the guts to stand up for what's right. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody has to get up in front of a podium and give lectures on this subject. It doesn't mean that everybody has to write books about it. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that we have to go out on the lecture circuit. There are plenty of things that people can do right where they are without going out on a limb too much. And I mean, if we just had the guts to speak frankly and truthfully about these issues, with our family and in our workplace and at parties and wherever, that would do so much to get the truth out about this kind of thing. The ridicule is going to continue as long as we allow it to continue. We're ultimately responsible for it. This was hard for me to admit to myself. But, I thought about it. In the past, I had blamed the cover-up guys, blamed them. It's their fault, it's their fault, it's their fault. Well, it's not their fault, it's our fault. It's their fault if they try it, but it's our fault if we allow it to continue. So, I really think that we all need to have a little bit of courage to stand up for the truth. I mean, what is wrong with that? I don't think there's anything wrong with standing up for the truth. What if somebody laughs? I mean, so what? What if somebody laughs? It's not going to kill us if somebody laughs, So we need to speak out where we are when the opportunity presents itself, and it does present itself. And I was working at that factory when the movie Signs came out, and everybody who went to see Signs, and it gave me a wonderful opportunity to talk about aliens and stuff. I mean, I didn't get into all of this stuff that I was talking about here. I didn't give them a 2-hour lecture. But I certainly opened up some conversations, and I found out in that factory a very conservative, what I consider middle America. You get them in a group, you're going to have some laughter. You take that same group one-on-one, and you talk to them, and you get something entirely different altogether. You find out that some of those people have had experiences. Or if they didn't, Aunt Kay did, or Cousin Leroy, or their best friend. But you find that one-on-one, that this is going on a whole lot more than anybody would ever realize if you just put them all together in a group and talk about this kind of stuff. So I just urge you to, search your hearts and souls and try to find the courage to just speak out about this when you can. And like I said, I realize that we don't all need to be out on the lecture circuit and writing books, but we do have opportunities every day that we pass up because we've allowed the fear to override anything else. There are other things you can do too. You can do things behind the scenes to help the truth get out. You can buy books and tapes and donate them to your public libraries, schools, jails. Give them to friends who are sitting on the fence about this kind of thing. You can do that. That would help to get the truth out, to educate people about this subject. Help the people who are speaking out publicly about this stuff. There aren't a whole lot of people out there doing it, and the few who are out there doing it need support, all kinds of support, all kinds of support. Words of encouragement, prayers, all kinds. So, try to help out that way if you can. If you don't feel like you can say a word about it to anybody, then you can do things behind the scenes. That said, please know that I appreciate your interest in this subject so very much because it affects so many people. And I feel that I'm speaking on behalf of all of us experiencers when I say that I appreciate everything you all are doing or can do to help promote the cause of exposing this truth. So thank you very much. We have time to take a few questions, I think.
We do. Can we have the lights, please, and Leah will take a few questions?
Yeah, I do have a request before. Oh, good, I can see you now. You blew your chance at throwing the tomatoes. I can see you now. Before you ask questions, I do have this request, and that is, by asking questions, I mean just that. Ask me a question. I'm very happy to hear about your experiences. I really am, but I don't think this is a proper venue for that. So if you want to talk to me later about your own experiences, that's fine. I'll be glad to hear them. But right now, let's please just limit the questions to short questions only that would be of interest to everybody in the group or might be able to help somebody. So who wants to go first? Okay.
There's some mics over here, guys. Please come up to the mic. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Leah. Thank you so much for that. You're so brave and sweet, and I want to talk to you so much more. And I have relatives in Alabama, and I lived in Alabama for a while. I wanted to ask you, because we've shared some experiences, do you have any members that worked in the military or in intelligence? There's a very high correlation in abductees with having, family members that came from that background.
That's a good question. Not in intelligence as far as I know. Okay. My first husband was in the military for 4 years. And this is one of the things I wrote about in Unlocking Alien Closets, is that during that period of time, a man who worked in a civilian role on a military base just came into my place. I was working in what back then you'd have to be a baby boomer to appreciate the term dime store, because they don't exist anymore. But I was working in what we called a dime store at that time, and a stranger approached me total stranger, approached me and offered me a much better position in a civilian role on a military base. And this was back in 1973, way before I knew about any of this stuff. And naturally I accepted it, and I always thought that was weird. And I've gotten several jobs that I did not apply for that I don't know how I got.
So you worked at this base?
Yes, I did. I worked on the base as a teacher's aide, as a civilian, but on the base.
Did you have
in
any
Laurel Bay?
No parents? Okay.
No, Laurel Bay, South Carolina. No parents in the military.
Okay. Or NASA or aerospace industries?
An uncle, yes, but parents, no.
Okay, thank you.
But my husband, yes. My husband was first husband. Yes. 15.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Unlocking Alien Closets 20, Lost was a key 17. Yes.
Yeah, I just got a short question. Like, what do you think's the story behind that short guy with the blue suit? Think he's like a hybrid guy or something? He's just some.
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I really, sorry, don't know. I saw him with the military person, whether he was a hybrid, a hologram, whatever, I don't know for sure.
Looked like a Keynes painting or something. But if you get, well, it ever went like they threaten you and they say that, if you talk, you're gonna get, and then they don't follow through on it, but then they tell you you're going to implant memories. Does it ever get confusing? You think you're lecturing implanted memories instead of what actually, but you got this feeling.
Oh, sure. That's one reason I bring it up in just about every lecture that I lecture, and I wrote about that too. So yeah, that's a problem. It really is.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons that at the very beginning I prefaced my lecture with, don't automatically accept everything I say. Go out and do your own research. These are issues that I want to bring up so that you have a basis on which to do your research.
Well,
so
thanks.
thank you.
It's fascinating.
Thanks.
Yes, have you ever gotten help from a regressive hypnotherapist, such as Bud Hopkins, Dr. John Mack, or David
Yes.
Jacobs?
That's a very good question, and some of my early memories, some of them. Well, let me put it this way. I'll try to make this fast. Okay, it's complicated, but I'll try to make it fast. The first couple of things that I talked about tonight, where I recalled being aboard the alien craft in the round room with a white light and the aliens conducting medical experiments on me, that was conscious memory. But in the early which happened in the late 70s or early 80s, that's when that happened. So let's put this in context of time, okay? That was conscious memory. However, in the early 1990s and 1991, I started having a lot of new experiences. Bits and pieces of those experiences I would remember consciously, but I couldn't remember everything. And I did undergo hypnotic regression. Bud Hopkins is a person I called. He was too busy to deal with me at that point in time, not to mention the fact that I lived in Mississippi and he lived in New York. He referred me to John Carpenter. And my file was one of the 140 sold.
So basically, your outside help has come from, is it Dr. John Carpenter?
It's just John Carpenter, yeah.
Are you still working with him?
No. No, in fact, that's a good question too. No, in fact, most of the experiences that I talked about with you tonight were not recalled under regression, but were conscious recall. You know, the experience where I saw the stitches on, the black patches on the eyes, the helicopter over the roof conducting the mind control. Those were conscious recall, not under regression. I haven't had any hypnotic regression since 1993. So everything that's happened to me since 1993 was all conscious recall.
Yeah, I remember you were here at the Pickwick Recreation Center in Burbank about 10 years ago.
1993, yeah. 1993, yeah.
And
Yeah, a lot of those were, and at that point in time, I talked about earlier experiences, and a lot of those were recalled under hypnotic regression, but everything since then, conscious recall.
So essentially, you've been on your own with no outside support or help since then?
I haven't gone to any kind of therapist, that's correct. Not since then.
So you've had no contact with John Carpenter in the last 10 years then?
Well, no, I didn't say that. I mean, we've spoken at a lot of the same conferences.
But
I haven't had hypnotic regression since 1993.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
In your alien abduction, you've been abducted by these aliens. Do they ever take you to like underground alien bases in like the Southwest Joshua Tree, the desert part of Southern California, that were full of those reptilian greys and those hooded ones? And do they take you like anywhere like out into space, off world, like to the moon, Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, with, and do they keep you longer than 2 hours?
Okay, that's all I can handle at one time, okay? Okay. The entities, the chalky colored creatures with the big black eyes,
Yes.
they did take me to a base that was, I got the impression that it was under the ocean. And there was a base down there that had a whole bunch of different spaceships in there. I remember seeing, I call it a parking garage for spaceships. There were about 12 spaceships in the underwater base. But as far as being taken to another planet, I don't recall that ever happening. And I did talk about the military facility that was in a camouflaged hillside.
What?
Actually, I got that wrong. Actually, it was a hillside with a camouflaged facility. So yeah, that. But I don't know where it was. I don't know where that was located.
Because you were like here in the early 90s, about 10 years ago. How many have you been abducted within the past 10 years? And if so, how many times?
I have been abducted within the last 10 years, but really I haven't. I don't know how many times. Quite a few times. But the exact number I don't know.
And how long did each abduction last on the average about?
Some of them short periods of time, like a couple of hours, and there have been some experiences where I've had an entire day missing.
Oh yeah, did they ever like beam into your bedroom and beam you aboard the spacecraft like that?
I have memories of that having happened. That is correct. Okay. I guess we better let somebody
Okay,
else
thank
do
you
it.
very
Thank you very
much.
much.
I'm just curious to know, when you started going back to this new church and you had more spiritual answers to what was happening to you, did the nature of your experiences change with this new feeling and this new information? Have you noticed a change in the nature of the events? Do you feel more protected now, or still really awful things happening?
That's a very good question. I feel I don't have nearly as much apprehension as I did before. I got rid of my basic fear a long time ago. I guess that's probably not the best way to put it. Probably a better way to put it is more of a peaceful feeling. As far as that is concerned.
Do you mean peaceful about aliens, and not peaceful about the military stuff?
No. Just a general kind of peace. Now, on the other hand, I have become extremely more passionate about revealing what's going on, because I feel that as human beings, our rights have been greatly violated. So I become more passionate about that. I guess it's more of an inner peace that I feel. That's probably the best way to put it. I feel more of an inner peace. I've seen protection, though, it's not just a matter of feeling a spiritual protection, but I've had evidence of human protection also. I wrote in Unlocking Alien Closets, I wrote about some guy named Jeff, whom I never met. I don't know who he is. I don't know where he lived. He said Texas, but I don't know. And this is one of the things I could never prove. It's something I could not prove. But there's plenty of evidence, as far as I'm concerned, that he and his group are helping me behind the scenes. And I've seen way too many times when I've found myself in what I consider dangerous situations, and something weird happened and got me out of it. So I do feel protected. Maybe it's a false sense of protection. I don't know, because, I try to look at every angle. But I feel protected.
But the scary things are still happening. You're just relating to
The things have, ironically, the mind control experiments and that kind of thing have greatly decreased since I became more and more open about this stuff.
Good. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
About the underwater activity you've seen, do you know where that was located? Do you know where places that you've been? Do you know you have an idea of where in the country, where in the world?
I don't know. I got there was something that made me think that it was possibly in the Gulf of Mexico around the Gulf Breeze, Pensacola area.
You mentioned you'd been there before.
Right.
Did that happen? Did that
During
sighting
that
happen during
period, it was during that period of time. It was during the period of time when I was going down there quite a lot. And the water and everything looked consistent with that area. But as far as knowing, I don't know. That it was just the sense that I got.
Oh, it was a sense. And as far as the pictures you showed of the stun gun, where did those come from?
Those pictures of the sticky shocker. The sticky shocker is that particular one that I showed is developed by a company called J-Core. And J-Core, you can actually find, or at least you could, in a couple of years ago, you could find information about that thing on the internet. And my husband and I contacted J-Core and asked for their permission to put those pictures in my book.
Now, your husband helped you find that?
This is my current husband, remember, number 2,
Yes,
the one who's
number 2.
supportive. Yes, he did.
And how did you meet number 2, and how were you able to open up to him about your experiences? Has he had experiences too?
My current husband's Mark Davenport, and he had been researching this phenomenon for 20 years when I met him, and now he's been researching it for 30-odd years, 30-something years. So he actually was more familiar with the phenomenon than I, because he had been researching this from an objective point of view rather than from an experiencer point of view.
You have children. Are they from your first marriage?
2 daughters from my first marriage.
What are their experiences? That's my last question.
Their experiences are, I'm not allowed to talk about my daughters.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Did these aliens or the military associated with them ever use you in a sexual way? Or did you ever have an unexplained miscarriage or something like that?
Yes. Yeah, I wrote about some of that stuff. I had a lot of problems. Back in the early, and this is a hard thing to talk about, but back in the early 90s, I had a lot of physical problems where I felt as if I had been abused extensively, but just had little bits and pieces of disturbing memories associated, and since that period of time, more and more memories have come back and things have been falling into place, and begin putting the pieces together, and there is a history there, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
We'll make this gentleman's question here the last question. Okay, after Barbara.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Leah, I wonder if you've ever had experiences with the ETs where they've been training you to do healing or something inspiring, or if they've really encouraged you, if you're aware that they've encouraged you in your mission to get out here and share all this information. Bring it to light.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Now, if I get off track with this, get me back on it, okay? Because this was kind of a part A and a part B, all right?
Yeah.
So get me back on it. But this is important. Yes, I have received training from some source that I cannot identify. I don't know where the training's coming from. I recall that back in the early 90s, I had an experience with an alien creature that I called the teacher. He was by himself, and I remember that we both were standing, and we were standing face to face. He was a lot taller than the other creatures that I showed on the screen. And I only remember one encounter with him. He reminded me of the creatures that were at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
Okay? And I remembered him telling me, now, you know, here are things that we need you to remember for the future, but I don't remember what those things were. So that's the only alien connection I can see there. However, there have been many, many, many times that I've had these virtual reality experiences that I mentioned before that were not those, that were of a different kind from the ones I said that I felt might be meant to scare me. I've had other virtual reality experiences that concerned earthquakes and flooding, tidal waves, tornadoes, Middle Eastern attack, way before 9/11. I was having virtual reality experiences of Middle Eastern attacks, and even Middle Eastern attacks with Middle Easterners on foot, you know, like guerrilla warfare throughout the country long before 9/11. So as devastating as that was to me, it was not surprising to me. It was almost as if I had been prepared to deal with that. And there have been these experiences like that where I have been in charge of a rationing program. Like there was a huge food shortage, and I was put in charge of doing the rationing, actually taking inventory of the perishable foods and making sure that they went out first before we tapped into the dried foods and the canned foods and that kind of thing. So yeah, I've had lots of these scenarios where I was prepared to deal with all sorts of disasters. I've had others where I actually was trained to fight and to escape guerrilla warfare attacks, all sorts of things like that. But Barbara, I don't know who or what is responsible for putting those scenarios into my life. Yeah. And that's a big question I have. That's one of my biggies that remain unanswered. And I need to do a whole lot more research on that and find out the perspective from other abductees who have gone through the same sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And did I answer every part of it, or was there another part?
Just the one last part. I'm just wondering, from experiences I've had and other people I know, if you feel that some of these beings, we'll call them extraterrestrial, are really encouraging you to do exactly what you're doing.
Oh,
in other
yeah,
words,
that
to really
part.
share this information publicly.
That part, I received a silent voice message way back in 1991, right before I went public. This silent voice message said, "We will be coming in greater numbers and with greater frequency, and we need for the public to be prepared because we don't want them to be afraid. Mm-hmm. So we want you to speak and write about this subject." Mm-hmm. And they even told me that it would take a lot of strength because they said that you all have to undergo a lot of ridicule and harassment. I was told that ahead of time by some force that I could not see. Mm-hmm. So, but I don't know, again, whether it was alien or what, I don't know.
And maybe those whom we think are alien or whom we give that label to as alien are not alien. You know, maybe there's some really high goodness in a lot of them too. Anyway, God bless you for what you do. That's just great.
Well, thank you, and thanks for your work too. Appreciate that.
I enjoyed your talk very much. You said
Thanks.
one thing that I was hoping you could elaborate on. You said you had mentioned that on the internet you had seen pictures, and I didn't understand it, if it was entities or humans that you had said had been involved in your abductions. If you could elaborate on that.
Humans, yeah. Yeah, some of the human beings that I talked about in my earlier experiences, that in the course of my research over the past few years, I have stumbled across some photos of some of them. And it's been really hard for me to decide what to do about that information, you know, what to do with it, you know, whether to name names or whether not to name names. It's a real hard position to be in. Lots of people have tried to get me to name the names, and I hope that at some point in time that those individuals will be put out of commission. Right now, they have more resources at their disposal than I do. I don't think that it would be prudent of me right now, right here, to start rattling off names for, it has nothing to do with fear. I don't care, like I said a little while ago, we're all going to die, so that's not it. But the point is, right now, there's not anything that I, as an individual, can do about it yet. If a person really wants to know who these CHEOPs, as I call them, are, and really wants to do serious research, they are findable. Go on the internet, go to mindcontrolforum.com and other mind control websites, and do extensive research on the internet, typing in mind control and various related subjects, and the same names that keep coming up over and over and over and over again from the mouths of other mind control victims, those are the ones you want to look at.
Would you ever feel compelled to contact them directly and say, I'm aware of who you are?
They know that. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
And thank you very much, by the way,
Let's all
for
thank
your
Leah.
Thank you.
Thank you.